Now, before we get started, I want to explain a little bit about the course. They're intended to be really a review. Both for those of you who are doing research, we're hoping that it's interactive, get you think about things that you haven't thought about, maybe encountered in practice in a while, because these are comprehensive courses that cover a wide range of issues. For those of you doing board prep, there's no way in 2 days that we're going to teach you how to be a pharmacotherapy specialist or an ambulatory care specialist. That is just not possible. We assume you come into the room with experience, that you're already experts in your field. You're coming here essentially to find out what's on the exam and to identify your areas of weakness so that you can do further study after you leave here. And that's really the intent of the course, is to give you a brief overview of the types of things that will show up on these exams and how to better prepare yourself for them. So we're not really teaching you things. We are hopefully reviewing things with you that you already know, and if you don't already know it, then that's probably something that you need to review and study some more on your own. Each of the courses we use what's called a complex case, and on the board certification exams you usually get a case that may have some complexity, but it's not terribly long because they don't make the stems, and there might be 1 or 2 or 3 questions associated with that. For the purposes of this course, we made cases very complex. Lots of issues in them and lots of disease states that the patient will have, as well as some patient management issues in each of the cases, as well as system issues in each of the cases. So the nature of the questions, just like on the exam, will bounce from one topic to the next. It's not like you're going to get a slew of hypertension questions. You're going to get different questions, a variety of domains, and different issues, just like the board certification exam. And it's intended to give you practice with the kinds of questions that you would get on a board exam. So that's the complex cases. Now, there are a couple of programs where we concentrate on a particular issue. One of them will be this morning's program, which is the lit evaluation, statistics, and research design. So that is a concentrated, and then practice management is another area. We have a concentrated program. We also have questions about them, but they're not case-based in the same way as the therapeutic content is covered. In your booklet, each program not only gives you the program slides, but at the end is study materials, things that the faculty have felt are particularly useful, reference sources to study on your own after you leave here. So we try to narrow it down to a few sources, because there's so many things you could study, but the few we think are the most important things to study as you prepare for the exam, or for those who are doing research, to having those references and knowing what's in them. In addition to the live program, there's some online programming that's available, and ASHP has put these up on their e-learning site, as well as they call them the core therapeutic modules, or the CTMs. They're kind of a collection of on-demand modules about specific disease states that you may feel like you need to study more on, and it's more in depth than we could have done here during the program. You can purchase all 14 of those. You can purchase single ones of them. That's up to you. They're all available on demand. I believe the neurology one is available to everyone for free, just to get a sense of what's in it, and because we don't cover neurology very well during the program itself, so that was one that we felt everyone should have available to them. So the neurological or neurology core therapeutic module is available, and the rest are available if you buy them in a package at a discount price. And if you want to learn more about that, ASHP staff is out there. And lastly, if you have a cell phone, put it in silent mode, buzzer mode. Anyone who has a pager, you need to get into 2014, because no one has pagers anymore. Okay. But if you do, put it on silent mode. All right, I'm going to be the first speaker this morning, and our first program is called Tips for Success, and it's intended for those who are doing this for prep. And at the end of this program, I hope you'll be able to state the domains of knowledge that are going to be covered on the board certification exam, whether that's AmCare or Pharmaco. Develop a comprehensive strategy to prepare yourself for the exam, and use best practice strategies to maximize your chance for success. So I want to start out with a little tale of Bill and Bob. Bill and Bob, depicted here, both went to the same school. same school of pharmacy, in the same class. They actually were both in the top 10% of their classes. They're very good students. And they both went off to do residencies, very progressive residencies, top-notch institutions, well-rounded. They've been in practice for 5 years, both of them, in challenging patient care environments. I will tell you, Bill passed the exam. He's the one with a smile. Bob did not. So what's the difference between Bill and Bob? I mean, they both had the same preparation, same educational background, work in challenging environments. Why would one pass and not the other? Well, first, Bill and Bob do work in slightly different environments. Bill has been in the VA for the last 5 years, and so he works mainly with older men. And it's kind of a restricted population. But he's the one who passed. Bob actually works for a staff model HMO. So he has a lot of middle-aged folks and some kids, some pediatrics in his practice. So in some ways, maybe Bob has a little advantage because he sees a wider range of types of patients that he has. So that probably doesn't explain why Bob didn't pass. Both of them are indispensable. They're practice models. They both have advanced scope of practice. They're ordered to labs. They can interpret information. They actually have prescribing privileges. They're allowed to change certain doses of medications, and certain medications are part of their scopes. So, they're at the top of their license in terms of the way they practice, both of them. So that doesn't explain the difference. So first, Bill looked at his areas of weakness, and he realized that he only works with older men, and he knows geriatrics pretty well, and he knows men's health issues very well, and he knows the disease states that older men have, but he realized he hadn't spent a lot of time over the last 5 years really dealing with women's health issues or pediatrics. So he set out to study those areas, and he also looked at the blueprint, the BPS blueprint, to determine what areas he personally did not have a lot of experience in, because he knew that would be the areas he needed to study. Bob didn't do that. Bob did not look at the domains of the BPS, and he didn't come up with a study plan about areas of weakness. Second, Bill got a study partner. He worked with a study partner as he came to the exam. They met on a regular basis, and they decided what the topics were. They taught each other. He picked someone else who had slightly different practice area. Actually, they invited Bob because they thought Bob would be good to have in the group, but Bob decided he wanted to do it on his own. Didn't like being in groups. But there's something about being in a group, and we do this with patients too. Doing something with someone else creates accountability for one, and two, moral support as you go through the process. Plus, you get to talk out the issues, and talking it out makes it stay in your brain more, rather than just reading something. So talking about the issues, therapeutic issues. And lastly, they used a lot of different materials during their study. So they used a lot of practice examination questions and a lot of different guidelines, and they talked through all of that about why the best answers were good and why the wrong answers were weren't the best answers. They were plausible, but they were not the best answer for each of the test questions they looked at. So that was their strategy, doing it in a study group and then using a variety of materials. Bob didn't do any of those things. So the day before the exam, Bill read the exam ticket, found out where the location was. He mapped it. He set his alarm, and he didn't drink a lot of alcohol, and he went to bed on time. He went to bed early. Let's just say Bob didn't do any of those things. On the morning of the exam, Bill arrived 20 minutes early, had enough time to check in, go to the bathroom, and be ready for the exam. Bob showed up 3 minutes ahead of the exam, rushed in, forgot the ticket that he had, was out in the car, and had to rush into the exam. His bladder was really full from all the coffee he had drank trying to get to the center, and so he was feeling uncomfortable through most of the exam. So, okay, all of this is to exaggerate how people can prepare or not prepare for a board certification exam. And I think all of you recognize that this tale was intended to illustrate how some people, and it is true, some people so poorly prepare for exam, despite their expertise, their excellent education, cannot do well on an exam because they're not preparing themselves well. Now, all of you are here at a prep course, and I'm probably preaching to the choir because all of you are taking this seriously. You're doing everything possible to prepare yourself for this. And so what I'm going to share with you are some of the best practice habits, and some of you are already, well, you're already engaging them by being here. But I want to remind you of them so that it sets you up for success and that you're a Bill and not a Bob. Okay. So one is the role delineation survey. How do they determine what goes on these exams? Well, every 5 to 7 years, BPS does something that's called a role delineation survey. They send out to all the people who are already board certified, asking them, what do you do in your jobs? What kind of diseases do you see? What kind of patients do you see? What kind of problems do you wrestle with? What kind of skills do you bring to bear on a daily basis? How important is it to your job? How frequently do you use it? And that information becomes the blueprint for the exam. Now, those skill sets, you would think wouldn't change, but they do. They change every 5 to 7 years. That blueprint changes a little bit because what people do in practice has changed. Years ago, pharmacotherapy had a very strong kind of clinical coordinator bent to it and acute care. And as time has progressed, pharmacotherapy has become pretty equal in terms of acute and ambulatory care because pharmacotherapy specialists work in both of those environments. The clinical coordinator supervisory role of pharmacotherapy specialists has changed over time and the types of things that they concentrate on and need to be knowledgeable about. So things do change over time. And the same thing with ambulatory care, although we haven't had a second role delineation survey in AmCare yet. So that's the blueprint. That becomes the domains of knowledge. Once they have that, they ask peers, people who are already board certified, to write questions for the exam in each of those domains. And the amount of weight given to each domain is based on the amount of time and importance that each of those domains have for the specialty area. And we'll go over that in a moment. But needless to say, all of this is developed and determined by people in the specialty. So the survey is to people in the specialty. The questions are authored by people in the specialty. It isn't like a bunch of people who know nothing about pharmacy practice have developed all this. These are people who actually practice every day who develop this. The items the questions they develop are peer-reviewed. They're validated. Sometimes are test questions on the questions that you'll receive, meaning they're trying to validate the question to see if it's a good question. If it's not, they toss them out. But good questions will end up in the pool, and they'll be reused as long as the content is still valid and true. And they look at that each year. So this is the definition of pharmacotherapy practice. And when you go to make the application to take the exam, they'll ask, does your practice meet this definition? So pharmacotherapy is the area of pharmacy practice responsible for ensuring the safe and appropriate and economical use of drugs in patient care. The pharmacotherapy specialist is responsible for direct patient care, often functions as a member of a multidisciplinary team, and is frequently the source of drug information for other health professionals. And by the definition, you can tell there's a greater emphasis on drug information and being a part of a team rather than independently making decisions about patient care. BPS blueprint, this is high-level domains, and you need to go to the BPS site and actually pull down what the specifics are, the knowledge and skills that they're going to be testing you on. But patient-specific pharmacotherapy is 60% of the exam. That's generally what we call therapeutics, right? 25% of the exam is retrieval, generation, interpretation, and dissemination of knowledge, and that's the study design, study interpretation, statistical analysis, all those sorts of things. And then systems and population-based health or population pharmacotherapy is 15% of the exam. AmCare has a longer definition, but it's the practice where there's integrated, accessible healthcare services by pharmacists, address medication needs, develop sustained partnerships with patients, and practicing in the context of family and community. Accomplished through direct patient care, long-term relationships, coordination of care, patient advocacy, wellness, and health promotion. And you are going to see from the definition there are certain things that are going to show up on the domains of knowledge that would be different than pharmaco. Specifically, public health shows up on this. So public health issues are addressed. Practice management, since practice management, like billing and things like that, things that pharmaco won't be testing you on, or at least not to the same depth. And patient advocacy is 10% of the exam. So there's slightly different domains. Both have at least a significant portion is on and about direct patient care and therapeutics, but that is not the only thing on the exam. And I just want to reiterate that that's not the only thing on the exam for both of these. A good portion you will not pass if you don't understand the other domains of knowledge. What do you have to possess to take the exam? To apply, you got to be a graduate of the School of Pharmacy. Makes sense. You got to be a licensed pharmacist, and you have to have certain knowledge, skills and experience. And the way they determine that is number of years of experience in the area of practice, as well as whether you've had any specialty training there. Now, it's not a requirement to do a residency. If you haven't done a residency, the experience requirement is a little bit longer. BPS now only recognize ASHP accredited residency, so if you've done a residency that's not accredited, you're considered as having not done a residency. You basically have to meet the experience requirements that someone who hasn't done a residency. So only ASHP residencies are recognized. Pharmaco, if you've done a PGY1 residency, that's all the experience you need. You can sit for the exam. For ambulatory care, you actually need more. You need to either do a PGY1 plus another year of experience, or completed a PGY2, or you need 4 years of practice experience in ambulatory care environments. So those are the requirements to apply for the exam. You're probably all aware now there's 2 exam times. You apply online. Application periods, they vary from year to year. I didn't put specific dates up here, but all of you presumably are going to be taking the fall exam. This is a good time to get started, and probably some of you already started on studying. But the application period, I believe it's already open at this point, but it usually ends at the end of July, so you need to apply to take the exam in the fall. Fall exams fall somewhere between mid-September and mid-October. It's not an online, you have to go to a testing center, and it is a computer-based exam. So you apply, you get approved, then you set up a time to go to the testing center and take the exam on a prescribed date and time. That's one that's available to you. So the sooner you get the application to get approved, the more choices you have in terms of exam dates and time. So I encourage you to get the applications in early, because then you have a better opportunity to pick a date and time that you want, rather than being forced into a particular date and time. It's not very conducive to your schedule. So there is another exam cycle. It's in the spring. That application's in the late fall through early winter, and then that exam's April, May. So, all right, preparing for the exam. One is to do that critical self-evaluation. What are the things that you really already know, you know well, because you practice them every day, and which are the things that you don't? And also, are you really a person who's well prepared for this? In other words, your training and experience up to date, does it really match what the description's there in the domains of knowledge? If you feel like you've got some inadequacy there, then some people wait a year or two to fill in the gaps with more experiences for them, because there are certain experiences they have not yet had, and they feel they need to get those prior to sitting for the exam to increase their chances of success. So those are 2 things that I always recommend to people. You don't have to take the exam this year. You can always wait a year if you feel like you need to be more well-rounded in terms of your experience, because I will tell you, the more experienced some people, the chances of success are higher. So identify your gaps. Make sure you're well prepared for this. TORICA board prep course, and you're all doing that. That's a good practice behavior. The main reason to do it is to identify your areas of weakness, because in the next 2 days we're going to cover everything, and you'll begin to see what kinds of things are covered on the exam and the topics that are covered. And we try to do a pretty comprehensive job during this, covering all the different domains that are covered on the pharmaco and AmCare. Develop a plan of study. So after you take this prep course, go back, develop a plan of study. What are the things that you're going to review? And I would make it a written plan with dates and times that you're going to do certain things, so that you keep yourself on track, and then get a study partner. Develop that study plan with somebody else. I highly recommend that. It's like going to the gym. I would never go to the gym unless my wife says to me, you got to go, we're going to the gym. I still don't go enough, but at least I go some because I have someone I'm accountable to. So that's really a critical part of this. Set priorities, obviously, about what you want to study. A lot of people gravitate to the stuff they already know because they already know it, and they want to learn it more in depth. And remember, a board certification exam is like a mile wide and an inch deep. You do need to be somewhat of an expert, I agree, but every topic you don't need to be super deep in your knowledge. So there's going to be potentially some oncology questions. You do not need to be an oncology specialist, at least not for this course. The oncology course you need to be an oncology specialist for. So the type of questions are going to be sophisticated, but they're reasonable for a pharmacotherapy specialist or an ambulatory care specialist. So concentrate on the diseases and things that you don't see routinely, that you don't know as well, because those are the things that, well, obviously you're not as knowledgeable about. Create an atmosphere that's conducive to study. And what I mean by this is free of distractions. I would not recommend trying to study at work. You usually got lots of other responsibilities around you. I don't think anyone would do that, but that's not a good place to do it. I would not, and for many of you, even home is not a good place because there's lots of distractions. Kids, people coming in and out, going to a coffee shop, a library, meeting with your study partner someplace else, and a variety of locations. Actually, research has shown that if you make a variety of locations, that also stimulates your brain to be more concentrating on things that are not having just a set pattern to it over and over and over again. So comfortable surroundings, free of distractions, phone calls, those sorts of things, emails, pop-up windows. You don't want to be distracted when you're spending your time studying. Two things. Research has also shown elaboration helps you to remember things. Elaboration helps you remember things. How many of you are highlighters? You like to highlight things in a book. Does absolutely nothing for studying. I mean, it's nice and colorful, but you're not elaborating. And elaboration comes in two forms. Note-taking, actually writing it out, or talking about it. That's elaborating. Those two things will help you remember things and get them solidified in your brain more because you had to actively do something. I realize highlighting and underlying is actively doing something, but really all you're doing is training your eyes on that. So not to say you can't highlight. It's good to maybe go back to hit the highlights, but you should also take notes from that. Key things like, what's an outline of, and what I think of is, what would be on the exam? Would this be a good question? Would this factoid be something that would likely appear there? Talk to your partner. Okay, let's write this one down. Because this one I want to come back and the act of writing it down, one, will help me, and two, coming back and looking at it will also remind me of it. Get plenty of sleep. Sleep-deprived people don't do as well as exams. Eat healthy. Exercise regularly. All the good stuff that makes us better cognitively in our lives. Also work prior to the exam. Try to spend some time relaxing. Lastly, believe in yourself. You've got lots of experience, getting unnerved about the exam or worrying about the consequences of not passing and all those sorts of things is not helpful to passing the exam. So I know there's some people get really nervous about taking exams and have test anxiety, and that's counterproductive. So learn to do transcendental meditation or something like that to deal with that kind of stress. Get lots of practice with realistic questions, and there's a practice exam that will be made available to all of you. So we've created a practice exam that's intended to be realistic. Now, it's not the same questions that will appear on the board's exam, but covers all the domains and the same weights and everything, and you'll be shown how you did on that exam. So, and that's important to do that. Everyone should take that practice exam and then try to find even more questions to study from. And if you get the question right, by the way, don't just settle for that. Understand why the other answers are not correct and why the correct answers. So elaborate on it. Even though you got it right, oh, I got it right, understand why those wrong answers were not the best choices. Direct patient care. So where to get these study materials. I said in the booklet we've put a lot of sources. But I think a standard therapeutics textbook, latest edition of them, is a reasonable place to talk about the big picture therapeutic issues. Now, on a board certification exam, they can only test you about well-established therapeutic principles. They're not going to test you about something that's controversial, cutting edge, that you go to a meeting and have debates about. Because if it's still in debate, you can't ask a question about it. So patient care and therapeutics are going to be well-established areas where there's consensus, this is the standard of care now. And usually a therapeutic textbook, if it's been published in the last year or two, will have, for the most part, most of those. So a good therapeutic textbook is fine to study from. Obviously, clinical practice guidelines, because usually there they have well-established principles of treating a patient population and concise reviews. And we've included those things in your handouts. Other content areas, it's not as easy to find. So how do you study about, what the Agency for Healthcare Quality does? These things you kind of have to go on the internet and study up about them. So we've, again, listed resources in there where you can find additional information about them. Practice management, which is important in both of the exams. Here's a few resources I particularly like. Building a successful ambulatory care practice for those who do an AmCare. ACCP white paper on this as well. Developing a business plan. That's a good one, whether you're in acute care or ambulatory care environment. And then pharmacoeconomics and outcomes is a text that ACCP offers. I think it's a good place for studying it. You may have your old textbooks from school. If you have these, that's great to go back and revisit them. If not, these are good resources. Reread that candidate's guide a few days before the exam to know exactly what you can bring and what you can't. Used to be you could bring a calculator. Now the calculator is part of the computer. And so these things change from time to time. You may tell a friend and they say, oh, I brought a number 2 pencils and I did this, and it may no longer be true, what you're allowed to bring and what you're not. So just read that, that guide. The other thing is critically important. Make sure you have a government-issued ID with you, because they will not allow you in the exam room. A picture ID so they know exactly who you are, because they won't let someone else who's pretending to be you to take the exam. It has to be you. Get a good night's sleep. Arrive early. There shouldn't be any surprises on the exam. It's going to be 200 questions unless you're doing it for research. And then it's only 100 questions. There's 2 parts to it. I recommend taking the break. You don't have to. There's a built-in time for a break, but you can do all 200 questions in one session if you want. I just think it's good to take a break just to get rid of any urine that may have built up, and just to give your mind a little, break a little bit. So now, if you don't know the right answer, absolutely, unequivocally guess. This is not Jeopardy. There's no points taken away if you get the wrong answer. You get points for getting the right answer. But wrong answers don't count against you. Not really. So you're far better off guessing. So just guess. You can flag them. On the computer, you can flag a question like, I wasn't sure of myself. I guessed between one of 2 answers, or one of 3. Flag it and come back to it. But don't dwell on it. Don't sit there agonizing over one question that's eating up your time because you're now not getting the questions you're going to do well on. So guess, move on. If you have time, come back and look at the ones you've flagged. Only the ones you flagged. Don't second your guess yourself on all the other ones. Do not do that. You felt confident about it, move on. So data shows when you change your answer, it's more likely to be wrong than the first one. So that's why I recommend not changing an answer once you've made it. Now the ones you flagged, even then, chances are you changing it is going to be wrong. But sometimes we misread the statement. Oh, no wonder I thought 3 of them because I didn't quite see that data. Now it all makes sense what the right answer is. By all means, change your answer. All right, so guess, guess, guess. Flag if you need to. Don't leave any questions unanswered in any section. I don't care if you have to just guess, guess, guess. Again, there's no harm in guessing it right. You still got it right. It doesn't matter why you got it right. All right. Take a break. if there's enough time for a little food, that's probably not a bad idea, although don't overdo it. Don't carb load yourself in between. That night, it's time to go celebrate. If you want to drink alcohol now, you can. And I'd recommend going out with friends who know nothing about pharmacy, so you don't talk about the exam. All right. After the exam, you're going to get the results somewhere between 6 and 8 weeks. Traditionally, that's what's happened. It depends on when you took it. If you took it in early September, you're probably not going to get your results until late November, whereas people who took it in mid-October are going to get it sooner. And that's because they have to have everyone take the exam, and then they have to analyze the results. And in that process, what BPS does is they look at questions that didn't perform well, questions that didn't perform as expected, and they either toss or adjust or do things with it to ensure the validity of each of the items on the exam. There is a cut point now, and that cut point is 500 points out of 800. And they do some statistical manipulations to do that, to determine what that cut point is. And that's by a weighting system and the modified ANCOG principles and so on. So, but everyone has to get 500 above. That's the pass point for both exams.